When Lance was 24, he was in a rut. He was working a dead-end job that had nothing to do with his major. He was living in a town that he hated. By the time he got home from working, he was too exhausted to do anything he actually wanted to do. He never saw his friends anymore. He rarely visited his family. He felt alone, alienated. He started to realize his world was turning gray. The things that had once made him happy were no longer cutting it. He was miserable and had fallen into that dark, deep pit so slowly and steadily that he hadn't realized it until it was too late. He didn't know how to climb back out. It was terrifying to realize that he didn't remember what it was like to be happy, and came to the conclusion that the comfort and safety of what he knew wasn't worth being miserable. So he quit his job, moved back home, and convinced Hank to travel with him to New Zealand. No plan, no goal, just getting away and going on an adventure, to get away until he felt alive again. It was learned that happiness is worth chasing into the wild unknown. Waking up next in the morning was like rising through molasses. His mind felt thick and foggy, and every time he thought he might wake, he was dragged back down to unconsciousness. When he finally did manage to wake up, his eyelids were too heavy to open right away. His body felt like lead, aching and sore like dead weight. He felt warm, but there was no longer a body pressed against him. Finally cracked his eyes open, squinting against the light streaming through his window. Save for him, the bed was empty, the blankets crumpled and pillows showing the ghost of someone who was no longer there. He listened, but he didn't hear any movement in the room. He held his breath, waiting, hoping Lance would come out of the bathroom and smile at him like he had before. He didn't. Keith was alone, and Lance hadn't even woken him up to tell him he was leaving. Something twisted in his gut, a sinking ball of lead that started to corrode. Despite his ravenous hunger, he didn't feel like eating. Wasn't sure if he could. He rolled onto his side, away from the side of the bed that had gone cold, feeling that chill seep into his skin, send icy tendrils to his chest. His heart felt as heavy as his limbs, and he closed his eyes against the prickling at the corners, curled into a ball to try to relieve the sickening twisting there. He had always felt as though his time with Lance was on a timer, always known, but he had ignored it. Now time was up, and it felt him feeling ollie hollow. He let sleep claim him again, but it was restless and fitful. Come on, Keith, just one more picture. Alora's voice was kind, her smile soft as he unbuckled her seatbelt and reached for the car door. He sighed, pulling off his headphones and setting them aside on the seat before setting out of the car. He shoved his hands into the pockets of his new finisher jacket and hunched his shoulder a bit, dipping his chin into a collar as he trudged after Cheryl and Laura. They had stopped at an overlook high up on a hill as they were leaving Taupo for, apparently, one last picture. The previous day had never spent stocking up on finisher merchandise, saying goodbye to friends, and packing, but it had given Keith plenty of time to mope around. He was still moping, if he were being honest, and he didn't really care if the others noticed. He stepped up to the overlook edge, a waist-high stone wall, and stared out over the buildings that lined one side of the lake. His gaze was immediately drawn to the large rainbow parasail that dragged against the horizon. He felt a pang in his chest that he was quickly becoming familiar with, a hollowness that was unlike anything he felt before, a regret that soured in his stomach, a barrenness at the back of his tongue. And he hadn't seen Lance all of yesterday. After he had woken up alone, there had been only one note, a simple piece of paper that read, "Good morning," and that was sent by a French press, filled with room-cooled coffee. He had woken Keith up to say goodbye, and made no effort to see him again after. It was as if Lance had slipped away from his life in the middle of the night, leaving no trace of his presence behind except for the memories that haunted him. His fists tightened in their pockets. He was an idiot. He knew he was an idiot. He had known this was nothing more than a fling, some kind of summer hookup and nothing more. A moment shared halfway across the world, soon to be faded and put on a distant pedestal with the rest of his vacation memories. He had known this would happen, yet he couldn't stop himself from feeling the bitter resentment of regret. Maybe he should have talked more about what they were doing or what it would mean. But what would that have changed? Nothing. He grit his teeth, jaw clenching till it ached. He was an idiot. He was furious at Lance for just leaving without saying goodbye, feeling like he was lacking closure. But he had thought that he meant more to Lance than that, so much so that he was tempted to storm down to the docks and demanded that he say goodbye. But he held back because what would that change? Nothing. He glared daggers into the rainbow parasol as it was dragged down from the sky, pulled back to the boat that was already turned back toward the docks. He was an idiot. He had simply thought he had felt something between them, something that he had potential to grow to more, something that could be a good foundation, something that could be built on. He should have known. Nothing was ever that easy. Nothing ever went the way he wanted it to. What did he want? He wanted Lance, but he couldn't have Lance. And that fact was sour and vile, twisting in his gut and clenching his heart. Lance hadn't even cared enough to say goodbye. How often was this a thing he did? Sweeping tourists off their feet, having his fun, and then leaving them to return home without a word from him? Was Keith just one in a line of many? Lance was charming, yes. He was cocky and confident, yes. But Keith hadn't thought he had the ability to fake something like what Keith felt blossoming between them. Apparently he was wrong. "Getting here," Shiro said, slinging an arm over his shoulder and pulling him close. Even Shiro would leave him once when they got back. He leaned into his brother's side, inhaling his familiar scent, and wishing for the world that he could tell him what was happening. Couldn't, though. Not without either hearing Shiro's disappointment of getting attached when he shouldn't, or worse, his disappointment in instance that Keith could have done more to get what he wanted. The fish-hook bandit was a heavy weight in his chest. Despite everything, he couldn't bring himself to take it off. Allura leaned into his other side, grinning and holding up a peace sign. Shiro held his phone out, camera app open, and flipped to selfie mode. He adjusted his arms so they were all in the frame, and for once Keith didn't flip off the camera. He didn't have the energy to. He didn't care anymore. Right before Shiro was able to take a picture, his phone died. "What the?" He frowned, pulling his phone to him and tapping the screen, pressing the home button. Lower side. "I told you to charge it last night." He managed to look sheepish. "I forgot." They used Allura's phone for the selfie instead. "Keith, can I use your block to charge my phone?" Shiro asked as they walked back to the car. Well, walking was a strong word. Both of them hobbled, like newborn deer who weren't quite sure how legs and knees hurt. They both wore compression sleeves on their calves to keep their legs from swelling, but they were still achingly sore, and he knew they would be for days. He shrugged. "Yeah, everything is in my other jacket." He opened the back of the car, digging through his backpack for his hoodie, the one he'd been wearing until they bought finisher jackets. He pulled it out, searching the pockets for the block charger he was pretty sure he had left in there, only for his hands to find a piece of paper instead. His brow furrowed as he pulled it out. It was obviously torn from the notepad in his hotel room, folded several times. He didn't remember putting this here. He turned it over to see his name scrawled on the side. His heart leapt into his throat, stopping his breath in a choke itch. Shiro and Allura were talking where they stood by the driver's seat, but their voices faded, drowned out by the rain in his ears. He carefully unfolded the note with shaking fingers. "Surprise note! Good morning, sleepyhead. Sorry I had to leave. Hunk texted me and said we have an early reservation this morning, and you look so cute. I didn't want to wake you. Not that I had to try to be silent. You were out like a rock, like, god dang. I had to make sure you were still breathing a couple of times. Anyway, wanna do lunch? Or dinner? My lunch is at 1, and I get up at work at 7. So if you wanna, like, hang out and stuff before you go, you know where to find me. Come pick me up. Later, Iron Man. P.S. If that wasn't clear, I'm asking you out on a date. Like a date. With food and talking and everything. Keith felt like he couldn't breathe. His hands were shaking, fingers curling so tightly into the notes that they crumbled. Lance had. He wanted to see him again? A date? A date? Right before he was going to leave? And he had done it through a note? A note in a hoodie that he hadn't worn in days? Was he stupid? He had to be stupid. What an idiot. What a beautiful idiot. He was going to kill him. He was going to murder that boy. His heart hammered in his chest so hard he felt his jade pendant bounce on his sternum. His lips felt numbed, distant. His mouth was dry. What did he want? He wanted Lance. That idiot. He slammed the trunk closed with enough force to make the others jump. Keith, what? We have to go back, Keith said, perhaps a little too loudly. But there was a ring in his ears, the pulse in his veins, and it was hard to tell how loud it was being. He didn't care. Sure blinked, then his brows furrowed. What are you? We have to go back, he said again. No crumple in one hand, curled tight into a fist. His jaw was set, eyes fierce as he glared at Shiro, daring him to contradict him. Shiro wasn't budging, but he didn't look mad, just confused. We just left. I had to go back. Why? I have to see Lance. His brows went up, mouth opening, then closing as no words came. He didn't have time for this. He turned to Allura. You're the one driving. Take me back into town, to the docks. I need to see Lance before we go. Didn't you already say goodbye to him? Shiro asked. No. Keith tugged at his own hair, the sharp pain of oddly grounding. That's the problem. He's an idiot who left me a note in a hoodie that I didn't wear for days, he said, and shaking his fist with the note crumpled inside. Why? Is this so important? He rounded on him, but Shiro held up his hands, quickly cutting in a calm voice. I'm not saying no, and I'm not patronizing you. I'm just trying to understand the urgency. Keith took a deep breath, trying to ground himself when his entire body felt like it was vibrating out of his own skin. He met Shiro's gaze steadily. We slept together, his brow gapped, mouth falling open, and eyebrows shooting apart. Twice! And if he wasn't feeling like he might actually die at any moment, he might find the look on Shiro's face hilarious. He turned to Allura, who was so much better able to take the news. She was watching him curiously, but not surprised. He left without saying goodbye, and I thought that was his way of saying he was done with me. But I just found this note, and his words got faster and faster, twisting his tongue until his breath choked on him off as his voice cracked. He held the note to Allura, fingers uncurling with great effort. She took the note gingerly and read it. Keith, Shiro made a strangled sound. My poor baby brother, he cried, voice dramatic enough to the point where it had to be teasing, but with a very red edge of surprised panic. What happened to you? Shiro, your innocence. Shiro, defiled. You're the one who told me to get late on this trip. It was a joke. Let's go, Allura said, voice scripts clean and authoritative, cutting through their conversation. She handed the note back to Keith. He looked up at her, brightening as a warm feeling flared in his chest, melting the numbness but leaving a raging fire in his wake. Really? He breathed. She nodded once, already opening the car door. Yup, let's go. Allura, no buts, Shiro. Unless it's yours getting into the car. This is a matter of romance and love. Keith slid into the backseat, hands still shaking as he pulled out a piece of paper and pen. He didn't think too hard on what Allura had said, and whether or not it had the potential to be true. When Keith was 25, he met a boy with beautiful blue eyes and a blinding smile. He was cocky and smug and competitive. He was kind and gentle and passionate. He was energetic and rash and impulsive. He was sweet and funny and thoughtful. He came to Keith's life as a coincidence, blowing through his world like a hurricane, taking root in his mind and his heart. Their time together was short, easily written off as a moment, not meant to last, as a random happenstance. He could have let it go, gone home and let him live on as a fond memory in the recesses of his mind. He could have easily moved on with his life without Lance, never see him again, and not think twice about it. But Keith didn't want that. He wanted Lance. He didn't know if they were meant to be. He didn't know if they would last. He didn't know if it would be worth it. He only knew that Lance made an impact in his life, and it was one he wasn't willing to let go without trying. He wanted to explore their potential, their spark. He learned that life isn't always easy, but life is what you make of it.